You got about. Yeah, no, that's my prop. Folks, we'll start in about 4 or 5 minutes. If I can ask all the speakers to come down and be seated and be ready, and for the rest, get your last coffees and be ready for the start. 4 minutes. Well, we might. now. I thought I was sitting there. Who's going to be the I'll do that. No, I don't mind, but yeah, I don't want to speak, that's all. I'll be right there. I'll just sit there, but it's you getting questions. Well, good morning all. And I hope you're all fed and watered and ready to rip into this very, very exciting session. My name's Tom Calma and I'm the chair and patron of the Poche Indigenous Health Network. And this is a Poche event from Poche Sydney, but also being supported by the network. This is our 7th biennial Key Thinkers Forum, and we'll get on to how good this one's going to be. The Poche Indigenous Health Network is happy to be able to host this event as a regular part of our calendar, these Key Thinkers Forums. And this year we're very, very pleased to be partnering University of Sydney Poche Sydney is partnering with the University Equity and Diversity Strategy Office of the University of Sydney. So this is a jointly hosted event. We have many important people here. We're all important who are here today, but I just wanted to acknowledge Warren Snowden, who's here in the front, so you can mob him later. And Warren's the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Affairs, but has been involved in Aboriginal affairs and Torres Strait Islander affairs, as well as regional affairs for many years, both as a minister and now as a Shadow Minister. And he resides in Alice Springs and is very familiar with this topic in all the years that he's been in the Territory, and so he's also got a wealth of information. Today we'll also be streaming this presentation online, and so the way it goes, people out there will be able to not only view us, they'll hear us, and they'll also be able to ask questions, which Kaya will kindly pass on to me, and I'll try and present them. But you'll also see the questions as they start to come through. If they come through electronically, they'll be displayed on the panel at the back. But at the end of these sessions, we also produce an opinion piece, and we hope that these opinion pieces, Poche opinions, are able to influence public policy, and that's the intent of these Key Thinker Forums, where we pick a topic that's topical, and then we feed that information back into state and territory governments and federal governments and any others who might be interested. And I shouldn't say they're all interested, but we still feed it to them and do it. We were going to have a welcome to country ceremony, but Uncle Max has been caught in traffic, so we'll do that at morning tea break, and when we'll move outside and have the ceremony. And I'd like to also acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay respects to their elders past and present, and particularly to their youth, as we do with all youth, who are going to be our future leaders, the custodians of our stories, our cultures, our histories and our languages, irrespective of what their cultural background is. And it's incumbent on all of us as senior members of society, some more senior than others, to grow our youth up and create those pathways and opportunities for them to be able to take on the challenges of the future. So I'd like to now invite Nathan Moran from the New South Wales Local Aboriginal Land Council to do a formal welcome to country, and come up, Nathan. Thank
you. Okay. And just to add, I'm not the State Land Council, I'm just the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, but nonetheless I'm here today to welcome you all to Gadigal land. On behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, very proud to say our local land council, like the 120 neighbours we have, are established under the New South Wales Land Rights Act to protect, promote Aboriginal culture and heritage. And certainly one of those tasks, and a key task for our Land Council, is performing Welcome to Countries. And I acknowledge today apologies on behalf of Uncle Ray Davison, a Gadigal elder, who couldn't make it here today, sadly, but passes on his apologies and nonetheless authorises myself, along with Uncle Alan and Uncle Chicka, to perform Welcome to Countries on their behalf. Now, as the CEO of the local Land Council, I must say, Gadigal country, very special country. Pay particular homage and respects to the Gadigal clan, particularly an ancestor named Corey, who occupied this very site. This site, prior to the university's establishment, was a farm, and in that farm it was recorded that at the very initial establishment of that farm that Corey used to look after and take care of this very area, and there was a particular creek that used to run through here known as Orphan Creek, which run down into Blackwattle Bay and formed one of the boundary markers, importantly, for the Gadigal clan, where they met up with the Wongal clan, who met west of here. So paying my respects and homages to the Gadigal in particular, the custodian of this very area when the site was established for what it is today. But in saying that, also acknowledging, and Uncle Tom also alluded to, the fact that the Gadigal are one of 29 clans of the Eora Nation. The Eora Nation, as we commonly refer to it, is the saltwater mob of the Sydney Basin. It was bounded by the Georges River in the south, the Hawkesbury in the north, and the Nepean in the west. And it traversed with neighbours from the Durrock in the west and the Gandangara to the Dharawal in the south and the Darkinjung in the north. But today I'm here to open an event that I simply would only have a word to describe in English as brilliant. We'd say deadly in our speak. Just to have our mob talking about healing, talking about what we know as holistic health, and trying to get a better understanding in mainstream and Western culture that we know how to look after ourselves. In fact, if only we can be given the opportunity to maintain and practice our culture, and particularly our practices in health and well-being, or simply healing for some of our mob. But in today's speak, we talk about health and well-being in the mainstream, and that's what it's all about, is getting our mob to share, but more importantly, have the ability to practice it. So I really say to everyone here today, thank you for discussing such a deadly topic, and to all the deadly people in the room. Wow, bit awe-inspiring, bit of a challenge for me coming in here knowing got experts in the room. Whilst I have a background in public administration and studying at a rival university, the Gabbar Law, it's certainly not in the same esteem as many in this room, but I pay my respects to everyone here today and welcome you all on behalf of Metro Land Council, and wish you all the best in promoting this topic, and hopefully one day soon you'll see our local Land Council and our AMS having facilities set aside for our own health and well-being, which is at the dear and hearts and number one plan for our mob. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nathan. And it's always important, particularly to look at the land councils, because 20% of Australia is owned or controlled by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And on that land, there are many of the bush medicines and bush tucker that make us healthy. And so we can't leave land councils out of any discussions that we have in this very important topic. So the topic today, a great one. Do we need traditional Aboriginal medicine working with Western medicine to close the gap? It's a topic that's not often talked about, not publicly anyhow in the public health discourse, but it's an important one, and we'll hear some very important speakers. You'd be aware that this year is the 10th anniversary of the Close the Gap campaign. A couple of years after that, the government responded, or they responded a year after we started, COAG did, to say that we needed to do something to look at Indigenous health, and took on a social determinants perspective on health, which is really just meaning that to get healthy, you need to make sure that you have, your education, your employment, your housing, your access to goods and services, appropriate food and water, etc., and to medical services, where many of our people, particularly in our remote areas, don't have access, but also to be able to encourage Aboriginal people who didn't and still don't use a health service until it becomes a chronic condition, to get in early. And so that's what the Close the Gap was, but it was very much around a human rights-based approach. And it picks up. But today we're going to be looking at that issue of will traditional medicine and traditional healing actually be able to contribute with mainstream services to be able to close the gap. And that's a timely reminder. If you've got a phone that's not on silent, if you could just put it on silent, please. Remember, this is being recorded, and so it becomes a little bit disruptive as we go along. So our panel today, a very illustrious panel, and I'll start on the far corner over there, and it's Debbie Watson is our first person up there, and Debbie and Margaret, who I'll introduce in a second, are both members of the Anangu Nungari Chukara Aboriginal Corporation, and that's being led by Francesca Panzeroni, and Francesca supports as the CEO of the organisation the group of Nunkaris that exist, and we'll hear a bit more about them and what Nunkaris are and what sort of role they have as we go along. Then we have Liz Elliott in the Peaceful Orange, Peacemaker, and Liz has been a consistent panel member of our work here as a paediatrician. She's done a lot of work particularly in the Kimberleys, working on FASD, working with the Kimberley women, and we've seen that really make a difference. And I think the bios of our presenters are there, so I won't go into a great deal of detail. Then we have Vicky Greaves, Dr. Vicky Greaves, who's I should say that Liz is a professor, and Vicky is also an academic here, and Vicky has been, well, we worked together in the 90s as bureaucrats, but then she went on to bigger and better things, and and she looked a lot at history, but also the interdisciplinary ways to progress Indigenous knowledges and products within academia, and a lot around religion and beliefs. So we look forward to hearing what Vicky has to say. And then we have Professor Nairi Brown, who has also been a supporter of Poche longer than most of us. Nairi was one of the original directors of the Poche Centre here in Sydney when it kicked off in 2009, and spent a number of years with us, and then she's moved on now and done many things, but she does a lot of work in trauma counselling for adolescents and youth, and has set up a not-for-profit to do a lot more of that, and subject to funding, of course. It'll all happen. So we will, again, it's recorded. There'll be opportunities after each of the presentations. We'll have a 10-minute opportunity to ask questions. For those that ask questions, if I can just ask you to please introduce yourself, just your name and organisation, not a long introduction, please, and try and be fairly precise about your questions that you have, remembering that there's no such thing as a silly question or inappropriate, well, there could be inappropriate questions, but not silly ones anyhow, and so feel free to ask the questions because that's going to be really important. These forums are really amongst friends, and it's an opportunity to be frank and fearless in asking the questions, and the panel will try and respond. If they can't, they'll refer you to the right sort of people who can respond. But we'll also, as I mentioned, be getting electronic questions coming through, and I'll try and present them if we can, if time will allow us to do that. So, Francesca, can I invite you to take off first with the presentation, up to 10 minutes, might be a little bit less, then we'll go into questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to, to pay my respect and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, past, present, and future, who are here with us today. It is such a great joy for me to be here with Debbie and Margaret today to share our story, a story which actually started here in this campus. It all started with one question while I started to move my first steps as a researcher here at the University of Sydney. It is a story that started here, and it's that questions led me to leave the academia at a time when I felt that I couldn't find the right answers sitting in my office. I left the academia, and now we are here back with the healers. It's such a great privilege. The question that led my quest for answers was why I can't find any reference to Aboriginal traditional medicine in key international literature on Indigenous health, and why I can't find a reference as a co-component of Australia's Indigenous health policy here. Why? Why? So this question kind of obsessed me, and I kind of took two roads. One, revising all the international literature, and the other one is to fly to South Australia, and that's where the most amazing, difficult, challenging pathway of my life started. So very briefly, I will just untangle what I identified as what could be the root causes lying behind the lack of recognition of Aboriginal traditional medicine in current Australian national health policy frameworks. And then I will move on to describe what my encounter with the ladies, with the Nankari, and where we are at now. Article 24, paragraph 1 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People states that Indigenous people have the right to practice the medicine and to maintain their traditional practices, the medicine, the minerals and animals. Now, we all know how the wonderful and sound human rights approach that Australian Closing the Gap policy framework has encompassed. One of the root causes that I think lies there, it's a limited application of the human rights approach to Closing the Gap policy agenda. The international human rights standards constitute the foundational principles on which the Closing the Gap campaign is constructed. Yet, paragraph 1 of Article 24, it has been forgotten and not embedded within the national health policy agenda. Why? One of the other root causes that I found, I think that is because of the predominance of the epistemological foundations on which the Western biomedical model lies, vis-à-vis the epistemological foundations in which Aboriginal traditional medicine lies. We have two different knowledge systems, and I think what happened, and actually I was very intrigued by Dr. Thomas' book on dogs of riding, which actually highlights how we have to think about Indigenous health in a historical context. And we have to think about the colonial encounter, which characterizes the first, especially the first 100 years of medical research. If we look at the writing of doctors at this time, there has been a creation of a linear temporal progression from a primitive Aboriginal traditional medicine towards a modern scientific-based biomedical model. Now, I think there has been a colonization at the epistemological level, and as any case of colonization, there is a tendency to move from an horizontal ordering of different knowledge systems towards a vertical and unequal ordering of knowledge systems. So I think that Aboriginal traditional medicine has been relegated, has been crystallized in a time of primitiveness, and so that relegated to a place of no existence. When I started to get my first flight to South Australia, I found a completely different story. So I wasn't happy with what I was not finding in the literature. So here I go with my little luggage and started my research. I started in Sijuna, and it took about 4 years to complete, after having met and interviewed about 150 people ranging from medical doctors, GPs, psychologists, Aboriginal health workers. And then after a couple of years, I had the privilege to go to the APY lands and meet in Frigon, Debbie first, and Cyril, and Gordon, and Wichiri, and Sam Watson, and Gordon Inkaj, you know, the other Nankari. Very, very briefly, what I was discovering in the community is that actually it wasn't true that, as I was told, Aboriginal traditional healers were dying out. No, Not at all. Debbie, Margaret, Gordon, Sam, and all the others, they are well alive. Their children are well alive, and they are here to tell the story of a traditional practice that's been alive for thousands of years, and it has just been forgotten, I think, in this country. It all started, again, I never had a plan, really. Just I went there, and it was just sitting down and having a lot of kangaroo tails and cup of teas. I think I'm a very curious person. I wanted to find out whether these Aboriginal traditional healers were still alive. So I found myself surrounded by kids and grandmas and stories and this beautiful Pidgin language. And I didn't know what to do. I just was asking whether they were still practicing the healing. And they said, Uwa, Uwa Gunga, of course, Uwa. And they started sharing with me the stories. So what happened is that these very informal chats on the dirt and with a lot of, again, cup of teas, it started to become formal Nankari meetings, initially in the Fregon Council and Umua. So from a couple of Nankari, here we go after a year of meetings, they became like about from 10 to 15 to 20 Nankari coming together. What they were saying, very, very briefly, they said, Kunga, that's the way they call me. Hey, Kunga, we want to work. We want to have our own program. We don't want to work with anyone else, with other organizations, because this is our own chukupa. This is our own law. Nobody else. And I said, do you understand? I said, well, I try to understand. Yeah, I do. And then I said, but can you help us? And I said, no. I said, no way, I'm just a lecturer. I can't. I never work in Aboriginal affairs. My background is not in health. I have a background in international law, but yes, community development at the theoretical level, but they, I think they were not really pay attention to what I was saying. So they would just, turn their head and just say, you come back, just let's sit and talk. So I remember sitting in my office at the uni, and every now and then I would receive this call from Cyril or Gordon or Debbie and say, hey, Gunga, what are you doing? What am I doing? It's just, uh, assessing, examination, or, just working. When are you coming back? Well, next teaching break. Come on, Kunga, come back. We need to sit and talk. So this Kunga, come back. We need to sit and talk lasted another couple of years. Until they decide to set up an organization, an Aboriginal corporation. So the meetings continued when I could go there, and in 2012 we incorporated into the Anagunangari Chutagu Aboriginal Corporation. And oh, sorry, I forgot this. I wanted to show you a few pictures of the Nankari meeting. So this is Sam Watson, and the first one, Cyril Mackenzie, just discussing different issues. And there it was at Umwa. So just little advice, some of the people in the picture have passed on since that pictures. So over there, it's actually the signing of the membership. There we were at Umwa at that time, and that was the day when they designed the logo of the organization. So very, very alive meeting, that one, I remember. So that's the logo that they have designed, which means red dots and black dots are the old Nankari, red one, the women Nankari, and the black one, Wati Nankari, men Nankari. They're all coming from different communities in the APY lands. They all come together to heal people Anangu way. That's the flag. And then they want to put the name Antak, and then hand in hand, which then had become the title of our report on the research and our work, which means working hand in hand with the mainstream doctors. So they always say, we can heal the spirit, we can do things, and doctor, we do our bit, and doctor will do their bit. In very simple words. So just a move straight into today. we have started just relating to the question, today's question, can Aboriginal traditional healing have a place in closing the gap? Well, in the last 2 years, we have seen and we have had about 800 episodes of care only in Adelaide and surrounding areas with 2 visits in the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service in Melbourne. 800 episodes of care of people coming, and what we see is, a lot of people are screaming out for this healing that they cannot find because it's based on concept, on a philosophy very different from our scientific-based model. They are screaming out for this kind of healing, and we try. There are a lot of difficulties still, but we are very proud and happy to have been allowed through the South Australian Health Indigenous Healers Brokerage Program to be able to work in clinics in Adelaide, where we go and we hold Ngangkari clinics. Clients can book in and come and have their session. Here it's different clinics. This is Max Watson, Debbie's brother, and the other ladies, Mukai and Margaret from Annabella. So the ANTAC is an Aboriginal corporation made of exclusively of Aboriginal traditional healers. So the membership is dedicated only to traditional healers from the APY lands. They have set up an accreditation process through which they identify who is a real Ngangkari, because there have been some issues that I don't have time now to discuss, but I hope we have time to discuss in further conversation. There is a register of Ngangkari. We have in our register about 20 Ngangkari. There are the young ones coming up who are training to become a Ngangkari. So it is a tradition that I've learned and I keep learning. So I'm Italian, as you can tell from my accent. So I come from far away from a different country, and I just think that it's a real shame that, you go and open the World Health Organization worldwide review on TCAM, Traditional Complementary and Alternative Medicine, where they talk about indigenous medicine, and you go and you start reading the chapter on Australia, and it starts with Chinese traditional medicine, has been practiced in Australia for a long time. And all the analysis, the financing and the policy and the support, the government support for Chinese tradition, nothing against Chinese traditional medicine, but there is a clear gap that must be rectified. The World Health Organization, Western Pacific region, has developed and continues to support the harmonization of indigenous medicine within healthcare systems. Again, if you go and read about Australia and how Australia stands as compared to the other countries, it's a bit kind of funny, because it is considered as at a high standard, at a high rate in terms of inclusion of alternative ways of healing in the country. But if you go and read more in depth, you do a more in-depth analysis, you will see that there are other alternative medicines, but not Aboriginal medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca, and you raised quite a number of issues there, and one was about the intellectual property, I guess. You didn't talk about intellectual property, but it's how do we protect the knowledge, and when we get into pharmacologies and so forth, how do we ensure that they're not being abused? And it's about healing the spirit, and the issue about complementary medicine, and Bruce Robinson, who was the previous dean here in the School of Medicine, he's now doing a project looking at complementary medicine and how it can be picked up in Australia. But these are real big issues that we need to contend with. I was at the World Indigenous Cancer Conference a week before last, and there was quite a number of presenters internationally and domestically from all over Australia who talked about the different healing practices that they have, without disclosing too much, to assist cancer patients, and anything from cures to helping people, you know, take on the journey of working through with their cancers. So thank you for that presentation. The other one issue I just thought I'd clarify was, you know, we talk about the close the gap and closing the gap. Close the Gap is the people's movement, and it's about 40 Indigenous and non-Indigenous peak health bodies working together with peak human rights bodies, and that campaign's been going for 10 years. The government responded COAG responded in 2007, and it was actually led by the Labor government soon after they got in to take on Closing the Gap. And so that's the government response. Closing the Gap is a government response. It is a bipartisan approach that still exists, and the significant difference is one is an advocacy lobby group that's very human rights principled. The other is a government response, which is not necessarily principled, but it's out there, and it waxes and wanes all the time, and that's one of the big problems. But we now do have the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Plan Implementation Plan, which the plan was developed under Labor, and the coalition has put in the implementation plan. It's been led by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and so it's a great example of what can happen if we do work together. But it needs to be consistent in approach and so forth. Anyhow, enough from me. Questions from you? Are there any questions we wanted to ask Francesca? Any clarification? Yep. Oh, yep. Kylie and Vita will have the microphones. Again, if you could just introduce yourself and who you represent. If you represent anybody or just in interest. No, well, that's success straight up.
Hi everybody, thank you Francesca, and I'm Sam Altman, who I'm afraid could just represent myself.
Yeah, that's good.
Francesca, could you tell us more about the interface between the traditional medicine and things like the clinics or hospitals or that mainstream infrastructure? Because as we know, a lot of Indigenous people end up in those places and often don't have very positive experiences in all sorts of ways. So I'm interested in how the actual traditional practices, you suggested 800 plus experiences in some of these clinics, I take it, and but you seem to be just guests at the table and not really well, as a basic response. So could you tell us more about that, please?
Yeah, sure. In Adelaide, especially in Adelaide, but across South Australia, I think that the South Australian Department of Health has established a very innovative and pioneering program called Indigenous Healers Brokerage Program, whereby Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders clients can ask to be seen by an Nankari in SA health sites. So what's happened is that we are one of the NGO providing Nankari services, and we have basically now established our headquarters in Adelaide because it's where most of the referrals come from. So the referral process basically entails that usually it's the Aboriginal liaison unit within the hospitals who contacted us and say, look, there is Mrs. Da-da-da-da, she really wants to see an Nankari, can you come tomorrow? So we go the next day or whenever. We provide the service in the hospital, especially in the Royal Adelaide Hospital. The healer is allowed in the room to do the healing, and then basically we send South Australia, the Aboriginal Health Branch within the Department of Health, the invoice for the service provided. Another way, we hold Ngangari clinics. So far there have been at Watopuruna, which is an umbrella organization for Aboriginal healthcare services in Adelaide. So we provide once a month Ngangari clinics. So clients, Aboriginal clients can book in and come and see the Ngangari. So there are also organizations. So outside the SA health system, there are organizations that contacted us referring their Aboriginal clients to us for different issues. That there can be a one-on-one treatment, there can be a family consultation, it can be the cleansing of the building. A lot of people have physical and emotional issues which are linked to a ill causation model, which is very different from our system. Well, I say our because I'm part of the mainstream, so it's what I've learned, and that's our system, mainstream system. So sometimes there are some spiritual interferences that cause people to be unwell. So it can manifest in physical, psychological, or emotional ailments. So we go to the house, we do home visits, and so the healers, we go with the healers, and we provide a one-on-one treatment or family consultation or the cleansing of the building or the house. So in terms of the interface between the healers and the doctors, when actually we go there and the healers do their intervention, and then we go. So it's put on files. We have had some referrals from doctors. There have been some cases in which Aboriginal, some clients, for example, wanted to decrease the intake of antidepressant with the help of the healers, the Nankari. So in conjunction with the GP is monitoring the decrease in the intake in milligrams of the antidepressant while the Nankari do the healing. So in this case, and it's a fantastic collaboration in which the doctors keep doing their their job, the way in which they practice their medicine, but they are open. At least we have encountered a lot of doctors that are open to allow, to let other ways of healing to be part of the client's health journey. So there has not been interference, but collaboration. So a lot of times clients come with the X-ray, with the diagnosis by the doctor. So it really varies. I mean, every time is a different story, but sometimes, like, we actually we're doing a lot of intervention on chronic, pain management, huge, any kind of pain. And sometimes after the intervention of the healers, the chronic is gone. Other times it's a more serious issue. It's a chronic pain, and it needs more treatment. So basically the clients go most of the time back and forth from the GP or the doctor, the specialist, and to the Nankari. So it is about assessing the benefits of the two interventions and see how they can work together to make people healthier. So we are also developing a research component within ANTAC. So we have purchased a database, and we have 800 case studies that we have just started putting to the database. And what we would like to do is to analyze the interventions and just to provide that evidence of how Nankari can contribute in people's health, and what are the benefits, what are the limitations, and how can we think of a more team-based approach, Aboriginal healthcare.
Thank you. And Francesca, how do the Nankari get paid? Is it part of the MBS?
No. Well, we are from there. Well, we are an independent NGO, so basically it's in South Australia, SA Health has established a fee for the Nankari, so they are paid directly by SA Health. Or when we don't work within the clinics, it's just a private consultation. So we hope then one day, I think the long-term vision is to see an Aboriginal traditional healer intervention as a rebatable item within Medicare and in private health funds. We can go and have a remedial massage and get a rebate for it.
Yes.
We can have acupuncture with a rebate. Why not Aboriginal traditional healing? So I really hope that one day we will sit here again in maybe a few years and we'll see Medicare. Aboriginal tradition means it's part of Medicare, and it's just about, I think, giving people choice. You know, it just giving Aboriginal people the choice to go one way or the other. And, you know, some people cannot afford as a private consultation. And unfortunately, you know, for the lack of funding, we cannot provide the service as a private consultation outside the health system at the moment in South Australia with this program. And why not to be part of the Medicare system?
And in fact, some of the health schemes don't have to have it under Medicare. They could take the initiative themselves
Okay,
and fund
exactly.
it.
Exactly,
but yeah, let's
yeah.
push the Department of Health to consider
Yeah, I
it.
don't know very well the system, how it's, you know, the intricacies of the system.
Yeah.
So I think it can be part of, you know, a bigger picture, and
Yes.
and
yeah.
people can.
Well,
yeah.
all allied health services, you know, this is just an extension of that we need to really push along. Okay, were there any other questions? Or just scratching? No, don't move, it's like an auctioneer. You make the wrong move and you're up.
My husband has been working as a locum in Alice Springs, doing conventional gastroenterology, but I would be really interested to know whether or not a similar scheme exists there, and if so, he hasn't been tapping into Aboriginal knowledge at all, and when he goes there, he's at Alice Springs Public Hospital. And so my other question is, I get the impression that the Northern Territory government seems to have a lot of spare money sloshing around, and I just wondered whether or not something is happening there because they have more finance.
I don't know about that. We work, so we work in South Australia. We get requests interstate, but we are at an early stage. Well, I don't know the position of the anti-government or what kind of schemes are in there, so I cannot comment on that. We are allowed to work in South Australia thanks to the Aboriginal Health Branch and the South Australia Health Department, which has set up this scheme, grant under the Close the Gap. So, well, we have been notified that unfortunately, unfortunately, it's, you know, part of the grant system. As of the 30th of June, the grant will end. So the COAC funding will end as of the 30th of June, and we really hope that the submission will get approved for another round of funding. Otherwise, we will not be able to work and to provide the healing to people, to clients, especially in the hospitals and in the clinics.
Thank you. Now I would like to ask a question, but I do recall that Port Lincoln Hospital actually had a woman healer there and who worked with all clients of the hospital.
Well, I'm trying to be very brief, but when I did my research for over 4 years, actually I found out that community control Aboriginal health service actually for a long time have had healers coming from the lands and providing healing on an ad hoc basis. So they had for quite a long time a bucket of funding to provide traditional healing. This is why I was so surprised, because, you know, I was witnessing this disjuncture between the policy, the lack of recognition at the policy and legal federal level, and then actually on the ground, it was already happening. So in the report that we have put together, there are a lot of, there is an analysis of the interface between medical practitioners and healers within these clinics, which has been going on for very long time. And, you know, especially in Nanapa Health, in remote, up in the PY lands, the collaboration between healers in the communities and the health professional have been gone for very long time. And there are very interesting testimonies by doctors. There is only one, if I have time, just very briefly, a quote by one of the GPs who gave an interview, and I remember saying, the healer once told me, you are number one doctor in all the APY lands, number one doctor. And I am number one doctor. I am the number one anchor in all the APY lands. You always go around putting things in. I always go around taking things out. And actually he continues, and actually it's in the report, it's actually the beginning of 2 different chapters. And he goes saying, the healer goes saying, you got the motor car, and you are number one doctor, and you got the motor car. I am number one anchor, I have no motor car. What about I get a motor car? Which is symptomatic
Parity.
of, yes, that, you can go around, and this is one of the issues of the logistics of providing the service on a full scale at the state and, even nationally. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Nai.
Oh, yeah, this is just a comment and hopefully helpful for the question from Alice Springs. I understand that the Ngungkuri initiatives in Alice Springs are one of the longest established initiatives through the MPY Women's Council. I'm not quite sure if they're still funded, but perhaps Mr. Snowden, I understand he's got very deep pockets and might be able to help you out there. He's right there, was. But the Ngungkuri were part of the hospital-based specialist teams and also were part of the outreach teams from Alice Springs Base Hospital, and they were engaged and remunerated in the same manner that VMOs would be anywhere else in the country. And we would very much like to see that upscaled and rolled out around the rest of Australia for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander traditional healers.
Thank you, Nai. Well, look, I think we'll pause on the questions. Oh, we have one here. Yes, sorry.
Just a quick one, Tom, thank you. My name's Jane Bennett, and today I'm a freelancer, but yesterday I worked for the Department of Health. So I'll just draw on some of that experience, and thank you, Nairi, for that bit of information, because I wanted to alert people to that one as well. There are traditional healing practices that are not so well known, I guess, and a lot of Aboriginal medical services do draw on people in their community very discreetly. And just in terms of the Medicare arrangements, the funds that are raised by art shows through the Section 19.2 exemption are available to be used at the discretion of the medical service for primary health outcomes. So I think that there is a little bit of scope there, not in a direct Medicare payment for that service, but an acknowledgement that Aboriginal medical services do raise funds through Medicare that they can use for locally appropriate primary health care
Exactly,
activities.
and it's the same scheme that general practitioners and other doctors also use. Yes. And but I think the point is that it should be formally recognised as an MBS item, so that they can get it. So you don't have to use the AMS's funds, but the same could be said about a mainstream GP. If they want to engage in Ngungkuri, they can use it out of their Medicare generated funds.
That's right. And I think that this does go on in the Arnhem Land services quite a bit, because there's other healing practices in Arnhem Land that have also been documented.
Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, thank you. But really, really impressed to hear that South Australian Health is taking that initiative. So that's great leadership. Yeah,
they have for a while. Well, look, we'll segue now into asking Debbie, and she'll be ably assisted by Margaret, to do a little presentation talking about what she does as a Ngungkuri, without getting into the intimate detail, but whatever she wants to share with us, please do. Evan, you'll be supported by Margaret.
Hello. Hello. Hello, my name is Debbie Watson. I'm from People, and I've been learned through my family and my father. I was born in Alice Springs, but my father is born in Poche. I learned when I was little. My father taught me how to Ngungkuri and work, like traveling around, and also he taught me to help other people too, and help sick ones, because we have a lot of family got same power. Spirit is our main one for our family to look after country and spirit. So I've been learning Ngari and working with my family in Beaverjara and in other community too. Hello, I'm Margaret Richards. I'm from Beaverjara too. And I was born in Poche in Annabella a long time ago. And my father was working there with sheep, and they went back to Pip. And I grew up at Pip, and he learned me. And I learned from my father for healing, everything, you know, like, and me and her working with Francisco, family, doing healing in Adelaide and Melbourne. Sometimes we go Melbourne, traveling around, healing families, and I heal my family's grandchildren and other family too.
Thank you, Debbie and Margaret. And can I maybe kick off by, so say somebody from Melbourne wants you to come down, do they just ring up Francesca and invite you to come along? And how do you make that decision as to whether you go and see?
Oops. Well, it depends. A lot of people just anyone can ring and they ring and say, well, I would like to have a healing. Of course, we can't. We don't have funding, so we mainly work if we have an organization willingness to cover the expenses, and so we are quite limited in the scope of our service delivery. So basically what we try to do is, well, first of all, we ask, can you come to Adelaide? So some people have come to Adelaide, and so they just come to Adelaide and they get the healing because it's easier for us logistically and from a financial point of view. So what we are trying to do is to start. We have already started a conversation with Aboriginal healthcare services. One example is the Victorian Aboriginal Health Services, Melbourne, in order to provide an ongoing Nankari service delivery to Aboriginal clients. So we have also organized some private consultations. So we try to say, well, look, if there is at least maybe 5 or 10 people, so we can offset the cost of traveling from Adelaide. So we try our best to meet the demands, but we are very limited in the lack of funding. So we hope that we have finally had a positive response from the State Department of Social Inclusion. So finally, after so many years, we're going to get a Nankari Toyota, so we can buy a Nankari Toyota and travel across the country. And the Prime Minister and Cabinet Indigenous Advancement Strategies, the Enterprise Development Grant. So we have been under certain conditions, which is the approval of an IBL loan. So hopefully we will get that grant. So we finally, after so many years, we will start to have a little bit of a backbone to rely on to provide the service.
So when you provide a service, say to a family or the groups that you said if 4 or 5 people get together, are people treated as individuals, or is there a sort of a group session? I'm thinking, you have yoga retreats and other, Indian
No.
Swami sort of retreats that you have.
No, you want to say how you, it's usually individual. It's usually individual. Sometimes they come families like mom and daughter and they have problems and the mom is worried for the children and they discuss what's happening together. But no retreat, no common healing sessions, whatever. No, it's very private. So it's a one-on-one. It's a one-on-one treatment. So yeah.
Thank you. So, any questions from the floor? Yep. Oh, they're all coming.
Sorry, Kaya, can you try to, the slides? I can't.
Can't move?
I can't
Maybe you
show-
dropped it too many times. No, you went backwards. Oh, it's only going to two. It's only 2 slides.
No. The other presentation. No, it's not. It's not there. Okay.
No, that's all.
Sorry. Sorry. Okay, there were another three, some slides. That doesn't matter. We just said that's all right. Just some healing country.
Question, please.
Yes, question. My name is Linda, and I'm traditional Chinese medicine practitioner. So my question is for Debbie and Margaret, or one or the other, whoever would like to answer my question. How would you feel about other traditional healers wanting to learn about your practices?
Only family, like mother, father, and the children, only they've been born in special place, like special area and country. They pass it on to little family.
Can I add something?
Yep.
Just quickly. As one of our services, we provide some educational workshop, which is, and some people have rang me asking to learn how to become an Ankari and to learn the practices. So this is something that they don't do, and we don't provide any training to become an Ankari. So it's a very special and complex system which is directly linked to family groups and sacred places and land. So it's not something that you can learn as you would learn to become, through books. So, but we do provide some educational workshops to, just to let people know that there exists this wonderful ancient tradition, healing tradition, and what this is about. And, the healers are happy to share, their knowledge, but not to teach how to become an Ankari. Yeah.
Thank you. Second question.
Thank you. My name's Mona. I work for New South Wales Health's Centre for Genetics Education, and I'm just really fascinated to hear from Debbie or Margaret. In genetics, often a health problem isn't just about one person, and I know you said you do usually provide individual care, but have you had any examples where you've seen one member of a family and you've recognised something which can actually affect other family members directly related to them? I'm just interested to know whether you've encountered any genetic conditions that you've recognised when you've been asked to help someone with a health problem.
Well, some Anang connect like family. When they get sick, like sick persons with family. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, my name is Max Dulumunmun Harrison. I'm a human man. And that last question about what this lady asked is that I find sometimes that offensive and in prying into our intellectual property rights. We've had that for 80,000 years and upwards. And I don't think that we should be just giving it away and throwing it. See, I have knowledge that I'll probably die with. And I've never given a bit to any of my daughters or sons or granddaughters and grandkids and great-grands until I can find the right and appropriate a person to give it to it. Because look, our traditional medicines were meant to be shared and utilised in a way not to be propagated for financial gain, because of the spiritual concept of our plants and our medicines. It's so hard for us to be able to ask all the, you know, to be able to try and wrangle that out of our people. And I've seen this, you know, over many years. You know, I'm only a young 80-year-old man, but by the hell, you know, I still like to keep and practice my traditional stuff, and at times I will walk for it. I can drive to a spot and I can drive right to the stuff, but I will walk to it out of respect of the plants and the land around it. You see, once it gets you know, different things that's being done with it, that's when things start to go down. That's when farmers come in and spray all our plant life, you know, all down in Ewan country, you know, and now I don't know what to do there. I had to beg and steal some property, but not like that. But you know, but I gave some stuff away, a little bit of knowledge in another sense to two farmers, and it's only because that they have a very spiritual connectedness to the land. Now they're propagating some stuff for me, and we're propagating stuff, and then we're going to be putting it onto this other farm, and then we need to get government then to come and pay our young kids to come in and know what they're doing. But again, they'll be selected. They'll only be selected in what they're doing and what they're planting these plants for. You see, it's a secret business.
Yeah.
Healing.
Thanks, Uncle Max.
Hi.
So,
Hi, I'm Tracy. I just wanted to add on to that with traditional healing, I come from a long line of healers. I work for DVC ISS. I'm Cook Yallinji from the Daintree. And so with healing, it chooses you, you don't choose it. And that's why it's very sacred and very important. And your elders, who are the knowledge keepers, they are the ones that choose to teach you that way. So
thanks, very important. Right. Okay, well, we'll get an opportunity a bit later to ask some more questions, but we might now invite Professor Liz Elliott to do her little presentation. As I mentioned, she's a paediatrician, done a lot of work in the Kimbleys around FASD, and I'm sure I won't steal your thunder, Liz, and just hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Tom, and thank you all for coming today. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and their elders past, present and future. As Tom mentioned, I'm a doctor with Western training in medicine, paediatrics and research, but for the last 8 or 9 years I've been working closely with women in the Fitzroy Valley, particularly with children who have early life trauma and fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, and I've also been working in Cherbourg community in Queensland. So some of the information that I'll share with you today comes from discussions that I've had with 2 key women in the Fitzroy Valley, June Oscar, who's the CEO of Manimuntukura, the Women's Resource Centre, and Maureen Carter, who's the CEO of Nidlingari, which is the Cultural Health Service in Fitzroy Crossing. In my work in these communities over the last decade or so, it's become very clear that the gap in health outcomes and in premature death remains a disgrace for Australia, and really the gap is not closing quickly enough. Now, the origin of that gap is multifactorial, and it really would be simplistic to think that there will be any quick fix. However, it is important to look afresh and to consider what new approaches we might consider to try and close that gap. So today I'll talk to you a bit about how we might incorporate traditional medicine into mainstream biomedical models and health policy, and how this might have a role in helping us close the gap. So traditional medicine, as we've heard, has been practiced by Aboriginal people in this country for thousands of years. One traditional healer recalls, and I quote, "In the old days our people were healthy and happy. Old people died of old age, unless they died of perishing in the heat and sun without water. Back then we would deal with injuries such as burn and snake bites, and with common illnesses. They knew what to expect, and they knew what worked. For example, the witchetty grub was crushed and applied to a burn, while a caterpillar's nest could be used to cover the burn. The desert mushroom could be sucked to treat mouth ulcers or oral thrush or teething pain. And the goat's foot plant from coastal Australia was crushed and applied for pain relief after a bite from a stingray or a stonefish. So the list of bush medicines is endless, but it's only recently that scientists in the Western way have begun to unlock the active ingredients which have so long remained elusive. So, for example, it's recently been found that the emu bush, which has long been used as an antiseptic and a gargle, has powerful antibacterial properties. Similarly, the fruit of the kangaroo apple, which was made in a poultice and applied to swollen joints, has been found to contain a steroid which has anti-inflammatory properties. And the kakadu plum is now recognised as the world's richest source of vitamin C. And this small plum contains more vitamin C than 50 oranges and has successfully been commercialised. So one of the problems we have is that Western health professionals have been slow to recognise the medicinal value of Australian plants, to investigate how they work, to incorporate them into our practice, or more to the point, to embrace traditional doctors using these as complementary to our Western medicine. Now, traditional medicine is still very widely used in Australia. So in the Fitzroy Valley, which was mentioned earlier, the communities where I work have people who remain very closely connected to their country, their culture, and their language, and they have a strong reliance and belief in the healing power of traditional medicine. As June Oscar said, traditional medicine is embedded in traditional culture. All our people have a basic understanding of how to treat common ailments such as the cold using traditional medicine, and elder women have special bush medicine skills and have a role in collecting bush medicine. But there are different layers of traditional medicine, and she continues, the traditional healer or doctor requires a much deeper level of knowledge, a deep cultural knowledge and understanding of plant and animal life and the environment. They require knowledge of harvesting, preparing and applying bush medicines, but more to the point, they require recognition that the treatment of a symptom requires an understanding of its causation. So in relation to establishing the causation of an illness or predicting, in fact, the response to treatment, the traditional healer takes on a much more holistic approach than just divvying out medications or dealing with physical symptoms. This includes, as we've heard, addressing the spiritual and cultural factors that cause illness and influence recovery. As Maureen Carter said, Western doctors work on physical health. The traditional medicine man works on mental and spiritual health. And I refer to the medicine man because in the Fitzroy Valley, most of the traditional healers are men rather than women. As we've heard, and as applies in the Fitzroy Valley, traditional healers are born often into a family of healers, or alternately, they might be recognised by the community as having a particular capacity to cure, and the knowledge is passed from one generation to another. Thus, if a traditional doctor does a consultation, that requires an exploration of the individual's, the patient's family and work circumstances, perhaps his exposure to sacred sites during recent travel, recent family and community events such as a death in the family, connection to culture and spirituality, all of these being factors that might cause or exacerbate physical symptoms. Similarly, in providing treatment, the medicine man can provide bush medicines, but at a higher level is able to connect with higher spiritual beings and objects. And this might enable him, as we've heard, to rid the patient's home of bad spirits, or alternately, to harness a protective force to surround the patient. In some places, including in Fitzroy, traditional medicine is quite closely integrated with Western medicine with clear benefits. So I mentioned the Nindlingari Cultural Health Services. This is quite different from an Aboriginal medical service in that it doesn't deliver health services, but it brokers services between the health professionals and the community. And one of its aims is to promote the integration of culture, Aboriginal culture, into Western medicine. And indeed, its logo is a picture of a traditional healer attending to a patient. Nindlingari promotes the principle 2 ways, 2 windows, acknowledging the benefit of combining Western and traditional medicine. And part of the role of this organisation, they believe, is to educate any health professional who comes to work in the Fitzroy Valley in the culture of that valley. Most community members would first, if they're sick, go to see a community member. And if they didn't respond to that treatment, would go to see a traditional medicine man, usually accompanied by other family members. And as I said, often this medicine man will work collaboratively with the Western health practitioner. So he might sometimes advise the patient to go straight to the hospital. If he's admitted to the hospital, the medicine man might ask, could he visit the patient during their stay? And the doctors in Fitzroy, for example, are open to allowing that. Some people, as we know from our experience, don't like going to Western hospitals, so sometimes the medicine man will accompany the patient to the hospital. But sometimes, as June Oscar says, the traditional doctor will acknowledge the modern reality and say, I've done all I can. And if Western medicine has been prescribed, they might advise people to use white man medicine. She believes this is because in the Fitzroy Valley there's been a lot of experience of people seeing the benefits of Western medicine for Western diseases. So I think what we need to do is, as Western professionals, reciprocate and acknowledge that Western medicine is not the only way. We need to understand the important role of traditional healers to Aboriginal people and proactively engage them in our Western medical health services. And traditional doctors have seen, of course, a dramatic change in the types of illnesses affecting their people over time. And this includes the introduction of devastating diseases such as measles. As one traditional healer said, and I quote, Nobody had diabetes back then in the old days. Renal failure and dialysis were unheard of. Nobody had high blood pressure because everyone was so active. Nobody had scabies or skin problems. He continued, "It's only since white people came to our lands that mental health problems have started and people have become alcoholics and drug addicts and cigarette smokers." And I think this brings us to the point that Western doctors must understand the impact of historical and early life trauma on health. When it comes to substance misuse and mental ill health, connection to country and to family are primarily important, and they're protective factors. And traditional healers have a vital and very important role in promoting these connections to culture and to country. So there are barriers in adopting traditional approaches when designing Indigenous health policy. This includes lack of understanding by us Western doctors that Aboriginal people have survived healthily for over 60,000 years. They include lack of acknowledgement of the factors that contribute to the current ill health that we see in Aboriginal people, and that, as I said, should include historical and current trauma. They include the failure to acknowledge the role of culture in healing and a distrust or ignorance about traditional medicines and their value. And they include a lack of understanding of the holistic approach to medicine that is taken by traditional healers. Now, we all want healthy kids like those seen in this slide. And we want these kids to grow into the healthy adults and to have the health that should be expected by any Australian. There are potential benefits, I believe, in policymakers and health professionals being if they are open to traditional knowledge. These benefits might include increased trust by Aboriginal people in Western health services, taking a holistic approach to health, as I've mentioned, gaining new understanding by Western health professionals about traditional treatments and their efficacy, and more acceptable services, acceptable to Aboriginal people that might provide better health care, better outcomes, and hence more rapid closure of the gate. So there is much to be done in this space if we're fully to realise the potential benefits that traditional medicine can bring to our Western medical culture. We need a meeting of the minds. We need a sharing of ideas about how we can make health services work better. And this will involve a building of trust and, of course, improving understanding by those of us who work in Western medicine about the value of traditional medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, and it's great to get the perspective from a Western-trained paediatrician to what's observed on country and how both need to complement each other. And I guess from an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspective, you know, we've got many years of redress that are needed from, you know, the lack of recognition of our culture and our practices to the actual denigration of those and ruling them out. You know, through people being removed and so forth. So we've got to rebuild that understanding and trust. And so it's, you know, I think very important to get these examples of what can work to be able to demonstrate to the powers to be that that, you know, they're worthy of support. But that said, we will still practice across the nation our traditional healing, our using of medicines and so forth. So, questions, comments.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Hill, Social Inclusion, University of Sydney. My question, and apologies for the cold, in studying medicine as an undergrad or postgraduate, is there a component of traditional healing or cultural competence at least in those studies, and or if there's not, do you think that there is a place for it in our university, like medicine curriculum?
Well, I think there's a place in the whole of society and in every course in the university for increased understanding of our own culture and our Aboriginal culture and the traditional culture of Aboriginal people particularly. I started teaching in this university about 25 years ago, and at that stage in medicine there was virtually nothing in the curriculum about Aboriginal health. And as you know, well, certainly I'm not much older than you, but in our teaching in school, we learnt nothing about the true history of Aboriginal people in this country. So we have come a long way, but there's still very little embedded in all the health professional curricula about really the origins of health. And I think it's so important to understand, as I said, the historical context, the historical trauma, including stolen generation, removal from land, prohibition of use of language, etc., and the racism that has existed over the generations. And unless we understand that situation, we don't understand why people in these communities, particularly the remote communities that I work in, are trying to hide their pain through grog and other drugs. So that's where the traditional doctor, I think, comes in, to understanding really the family context, the cultural context, the historical context. So to come back to your question, there's very little, I think, or there's insufficient embedded in any of our curricula. And, you know, if you think about it, very few Australian non-Aboriginal people could say that they have an Aboriginal friend. Very few people have visited remote communities. Very few people have contact often with Aboriginal people living in their locality. In Western Sydney, where I work, we have the biggest Aboriginal population in Australia. Do we see them at our children's hospital? Not particularly often. And I think that should be suggesting that we need to ask questions about what sort of health service people would like to attend, what we can offer, how we can change the way in which we deliver health to make it truly accessible to every child in this country, every adult in this country, whether they be Aboriginal or not.
Take that one question down on this side first. Yep, welcome.
My name's Miriam Kavanagh. I'm an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander academic. My dad's from Redfern area, so I'm proud of my dad for his country, Redfern. On my mum's side, she's from Lockhart and the Torres Strait, Yam Island, so I'm both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander academic. My question is to, say, everybody on the panel, as an academic trying to teach this area and bring it into the areas of the university, how can we make it compulsory? Because, I mean, we talk about it here, but nobody actually physically is pushing it to make it, to actually for Ngurries to come in, or any Torres Strait or Aboriginal traditional healers to come in, physically pay them properly to actually do it, because we pay GPs to come in, we pay consultants to come in, but we don't pay Aboriginal people anything, or any person that actually come in to do our healing for our students. Our medical students that I work with and my nursing students, they have no idea about this area. What happens is, why can't we actually make that in all universities around Australia compulsory in all the health sectors? So to me, it should be compulsory. The other part is, we have so many people that research about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander areas. I've never seen anybody give anything back to communities. So why can't we get researchers to give back?
Well, I think to address your first point, I agree that it should be universal education. It should be done by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in universities, not people like me. I think we have one of our Deputy Deans of Medicine here. She might like to respond to that, because it is an issue that we have to address. And as you say, we have to acknowledge people for their input and their intellect and their contribution, and that will involve paying them as we pay anyone else to teach. The second question, research giving back to communities. I mean, I think you should speak to people like June Oscar and Maureen Carter in the case of our research, and understand that they believe that that research has, which they initiated and prioritised and led, has had significant benefits for the community. So I do think researchers in Indigenous communities need to be very careful about not going in and taking away data, but planning right from the outset about what is going to be the benefits directly to the community from that research, let alone potentially long-term benefits. So I don't know, Tanya, whether you'd like to respond on a...
Thank you, Liz. I'm Tanya Sorrell. As you heard, I'm one of the Deputy Deans in Medicine, and I've been put on the spot. It is true that we do not have enough teaching in this area in the medical course. It's about 24 hours total at the moment and clearly needs to be expanded. In fact, in listening to the conversation today, it seems to me that we need to create a forum where we can have some interactive discussion with people representing different Aboriginal communities and groups. I'm wondering whether some of the traditional medicines are in fact quite different amongst the different Aboriginal groups or tribes that are living around the country, and whether or not we need to build some understanding of differences as well as similarities into our courses and into the opportunities for having training workshops. It's not only medical students, of course. I think we need to be thinking about the other health professionals who, after all, are dealing perhaps even more constantly or more often with sick patients in different communities, not just Aboriginal communities. So they would be just some preliminary thoughts, but very much trying to improve the dialogue so that we can understand the potential interactions between the Aboriginal people and the practice of Western medicine, perhaps as a start, and also trying to encourage some more interaction with the trainees being able to go into rural communities to help understand some of the cultural context. I know this is difficult to arrange, but I think it's something that we need to think about for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and that was a very important question, because this actually, the live broadcast of this is being hosted by the Lime Network, the Leaders in Medical Education. And I do a call out to all those looking online to get us some questions, because this has been the quietest time that they've not given us questions. But there is activity happening under the Lime Network, as has just been mentioned. I think as far as whether you pay Nunkery or whatever, that's an institution's responsibility to determine. Whoever they invite, they should pay them and pay them appropriately. And just yesterday, Poche Flinders with Catson, the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander nurses and midwives, hosted in Canberra a big session on cultural competency within the nursing and health professions. So you know, it's starting to happen, but we've still got a while to go. Did anybody else want to respond? Or just pass on? Okay, we've got too many questions. All right. Well, no, we've got one down here, or you've got one over there first. Yeah. Steve.
My name's Steve Cochran. I'm here from Sierra, but I'm not representing Sierra here today. I'm a community member. I'm 60 next year. I'm the oldest man of my people as of January this year. So it's quite a scary situation, the issue of closing the gap. I came here to a forum, I think it was about 11 years ago, where we were invited to actually address the academia of the medical faculty. And one of the issues that we did face, there were 11 Aboriginal people invited who were placed in a little pit in the middle in front of everybody else, was the arrogance of the young students with regard to academia. What they see as academia over what academia is in comparison to the Aboriginal cultural academia. My nana never went to school. She was a healing lady. She was an academic. We don't have Western education, but we have an education that runs back 60,000 years. And that's got to be a consideration that's taken forward and given due consideration to in the future, because otherwise you're going to lose us. As a people, we're dying off too quick and too early. Close the gap it's not going to help me, it's not going to help my sons, and I'll be lucky if it'll help my grandsons. But we've got to do something now. And the traditional medicine, I mean, I was in Western Australia last year and they were talking about the issues of dealing with psychological issues through traditional healing. That was an incredible thing. We were invited to participate, but my boss wouldn't give me money to stay over there for an extra week. But, you know, we've got to start moving forward, but from the history.
Thank you, Steve. Did you have one down? Oh, yep. Up.
Hello, my name's Carmen Parder. I'm actually with the Poche Centre. I'm an associate lecturer and academic fellow. I'm also one of the Wingara Mura Academies. I'm doing my PhD. And I'm really excited about this conversation happening in regards to inclusion of Indigenous knowledge into practice, into curriculum. But I would also add that it is critically important to also consider Indigenous culture and knowledges into the health policy arena. And in fact, that's actually the topic of my PhD. It's the inclusion of Indigenous culture and knowledges in health policy, because it's the health policy that drives the broader agenda. And it's vital that we have in place not only the dialogue around this important issue, but the mechanisms that enable that. And so consideration is critical around in having those conversations with policymakers.
Thanks, Carmen. Okay. Down the front, we have one question.
Oh, hi, I'm Kerry Welsh. I'm a senior health worker. I'm also a border director for the Aboriginal Medical Service Redfern. So my issue is I had the privilege to work on a 2003 Aboriginal report, national report, why Aboriginal people don't access palliative care services. One of my biggest issues as an Aboriginal health worker is accessing mainstream health services. So I'm just wondering, with the Nunkaries, my sisters up here, all my sisters up here, all my brothers and sisters here, I'm just wondering, like, you know, we as Aboriginal health workers, we don't just work 9 to 5. We work 24 hours, 7 days a week, regardless of where we are within the community. If we're home, we get phone calls, not just from family. I get phone calls from all over this country at times. Sis, what's happening here? This is not happening. How do I get a prescription for Close the Gap? All of this stuff is still happening, so there's much more work to be done out there. But within that report, also, it noted that Aboriginal people didn't access mainstream health services. If they felt they were dying, they would go down the riverbank and actually die down the riverbank, not wanting any services. I know here in New South Wales, there are still people that refuse to go and see a doctor. Why? Because they see hospitals and doctors as places of dying. They don't see it as places of healing. So within our Aboriginal communities, this is what we do as our people. This is natural, normal for our Aboriginal healers to do. So I actually do it myself. I have a lot of wonderful friends out there that are beautiful, wonderful people and healers and all over the country. But I've lost my train of thought now. But like, to me, we as a nation have a right to accept who we are, what we are, where we come from. And it's about understanding that. But also, it's about even though you don't understand it, it's about accepting it. Our non-Aboriginal peoples accepting who we are. You will never know who we really are, because it's, like it was said earlier, it's brought up through the generations. You know, thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. Yeah. This is important. Do we have one last question? Oh, yeah, we've got one back here. Vita's coming in behind you. Oops, she made it.
Thank you. Yes, it's Linda again. So I guess this is more like a comment rather than a question. I want to address the gentleman over there that said something about being offended at my question, at wanting to learn the practices, and that it's a very special position, a very special skill that cannot be exploited or commercialised. I have a deep appreciation of that. I mean, obviously, I'm of Chinese descent, and I'm very familiar with the secrecy and constantly qualifying the people that get taught special skills and so forth. And I suppose my point is there is a lot of the same thing happening in our culture as well, and a lot of special skills have died with a lot of families because of this rigid rule. So perhaps you may want to consider qualifying the people that you teach, like observing the character or whatever it is that you need to feel so that you know that they will respect your rules and will not exploit the skills that they learn. So this is, I suppose it's, if you're wanting to bring this into mainstream and have this available to everyone, perhaps you may consider teaching it to outsiders who actually have a good heart and have good intentions. That's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Tom, can I just
Liz.
just comment on that? I mean, I think when I'm talking about sharing knowledge, I think what we really need as Western health professionals is an understanding of the role and the sentiment behind traditional medicine, not the specifics of how to do it. I mean, we will never be in a position to want or to be able to do that. So, you know, I think we just need to understand the very importance with which it's regarded by Aboriginal people and the important role it has in healing and prevention, rather than want to obtain the actual specific knowledge.
May I just comment on that? Why would you consider supporting outsiders to learn a secret knowledge which is already passed down from generation to generation? I mean, wouldn't it be better to support the young generation to learn and to find their place in our modern society by practicing the ancient traditional healing knowledge? So it's another, I think it's important point of what with ANTAC, with the NANCARI we're trying to do is to create an employment pathway for the Aboriginal traditional healers, which is actually in line with, in the last years push from moving from welfare, Indigenous people from welfare dependencies towards full employment. So ANTAC functions also as an employment agency because we have developed an employment strategies that can actually create and recognize traditional healers as legitimate traditional healthcare practitioners who have a place in mainstream healthcare system by not merging. Actually, I just a couple of weeks ago I read an article that a journalist interviewed me months ago, and she completely misunderstood what I was saying. I mean, we have to be very careful when we talk about integration into the mainstream system. So I think that we have to spell out that integrated does not mean merging and or incorporating in a way that the Indigenous knowledge system is not acknowledged or respected. So you have two different knowledge systems that stand side by side. So as Debbie said before, it's a very, very as I learned, it's a very special gift that you have, and it's connected to country. So it's not just, you can't pass the knowledge to outsider because there is no connection with country.
Yeah. Thank you, Francesca. I'll give the last word to Vicky before we break.
One thing that I'm aware of is because of various contexts in which I've worked, that settler colonial Australia and other parts of the world have got a bit of a fascination with anything you say is secret. And they want to know it. So what's the point in having secrets if you tell everyone? But one thing I want to say about that is maybe, this is a very important point to consider, maybe this knowledge is secret because you can't express it. Maybe it is part of a mystery. And there's a lot of mystery in life that we actually do not know. But maybe there are people who have a connection to a mystery. And if they even started to try to articulate to you what is kind of held in, can I say, the fibres of their being, that they would be imperfectly telling you, and it wouldn't really work anyway. So I think, and I talk after morning tea, and it's probably a good time for me to finish. I think maybe you'll learn a little bit more about that from my presentation.
Thanks. Nothing like self-introduction. Nah, good one. But as I can smell a bit of smoke coming on, we might break now. Uncle Max is going to take us outside, and we'll do a small ceremony. Then we'll come back and adjourn for morning tea, and we'll resume here probably in about 15, 20 minutes. Okay, thank you. Outside. Oh, yeah. No, good. I've got a question, eh? Yeah.
That's what I'm really forceful about, respect and don't make assumptions. And the person in front of you says to me. Yeah. No, no. Yeah. What I'm doing is I'm just going to, I said to him, I don't want to be a hub.
suffering. And that's the most important part. It's not about you. It's about what you're bringing to your clientele, what you're bringing to the sick and suffering. So through the mind, if you've got a healthy body, your mind will stay healthy. And then you can see things a lot clearer. And then you can hear truth about, you will give them truth about what they're hearing about themselves and what they need to do. Especially if you're working in Koori connections. Because our mob, they're a deadly lot, they're a stubborn lot too. I can tell you. I know. I would like that. And it was so important for me then to go out into the bush and save this right arm from being amputated. Because I forgot what I was taught by my ancients. I forgot the medicine that they were telling me about. And it took me 4 years of operations to be able to come to terms with myself and with the medical profession. So I didn't want the amputation. So I reached for spirit, and I got it. I reached for an ancient, and I got him. No bull. I still got my arm today. I got my 7 years of scarring to prove it. And most of the people on the far south coast used to call me Wingy. That's how I used to be. And that was only because I was a silly young man at the age of 40-something who wanted to play football with my 2 teenage sons. And I got my blooming arm broke. So that was a great lesson. So any of you fellas that were thinking about playing football at the age of 40, forget it. And just rely. Rely on spirit. You see, I have this little thing that I call my spiritual emails. And it's connectedness with ancients. Try it. Some people might call it meditation. Some people got other names. But I call it my spiritual emails. Because they only come when they're needed. And what I must do about self. Nobody else but self. So I want to thank you, Mob, for just coming through that simple little ceremony of smoking. Thanks, Tom, for it.
Well, thank you, Uncle Max, and thank you for performing the ceremony and your wise words. Folks, if you can just start to meander back, but meander fast, to your seats, because we're already 15 minutes behind time. Oh, Vicky. I think I turned it off. Yeah, I think we need to top up here, please. Yeah. Hmm? No, I've got my key. What are you doing? Yeah.
That's it. Dorothy? Oh.
Hey, where's he going? Where's the broadcast?
I think I'll remember that. I'm so.
Okay, we will kick off, and can I invite Dr. Vicky Greaves to come and give her presentation. The topic's up there. Those others who are still making their way to their seats, if they can do that silently, that'd be appreciated. Vicky.
Yes, Tom. He was my boss once.
Yes, my boss.
He's not now. He's trying. Can I say to you, first of all, in my language, which I speak very imperfectly, Naranga Barangang. It means listen to me because I have authority to speak. And I need to really pay my respects to elders in Warramai who have trained me up as much as they could and gave me the opportunity to listen to them and to grow as a person. And in saying that, I want to also mention that I'm a person of a certain generation who's had an opportunity to know those old people in my own country and further north, Naku particularly, and Gambangia. And one thing that I became very aware of through knowing these people is what a beautiful culture we actually come from, and what a terrible crime it is that it's so disregarded and said to be very toxic in settler colonial contexts, and as a minority group that were left totally resourceless, no economic base at all, after the original Holocaust that we've endured. We've come a long way, and one of the reasons why we've come a long way is because we know the value of our culture. If one thing that Aboriginal people all have in common is we cling to the beauty of our own culture, and we'll never give it up. It's never going to be given up. You know, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, they'll be the same. I know that. And it's called, I guess, resilience. But it's also called knowing quality when you encounter it. What I want to say to you today is that I'm really, at this forum today, I'm really reminded of what we used to say years ago in Aboriginal education context. Because I started on the ground floor, if you like, of Aboriginal education in New South Wales back in the 80s. And one of the things we used to say back then was, there are two ways that institutions, like schools or universities, can see our people when we come to them. One of them is that we are empty vessels to be filled with all the right knowledges and all the right ways of being and all the proper ways to behave and so on, that in fact we are a people with nothing. So we come as empty vessels to be filled. And the other way to see us is that we are a people with a really beautiful, complex cultural way of being who can actually add. We can value add to everything you do, including healing. In fact, maybe Indigenous peoples of the world have got an awful lot more going for them in understanding the nature of living well and the nature of healing in those contexts. I want to start off by trying to get this to work, and it did. This is a diagram that comes out of United Nations contexts, and it's of great interest to me to look at the bigger picture when we're looking at the value of Aboriginal philosophy and ways of being. Indigenous people at the UN, must be 10 years ago or more, said, they made a declaration that all government policy and programs to do with Indigenous people should be underlined by the concept of Indigenous well-being. Now, Indigenous well-being is something that is quite complex and hard to define, and unfortunately in this country, governments have tried to gloss over it, like, oh, well-being, oh, being happy, so on, and also tying it up with health. Health and well-being are quite different concepts. They really need to be deconstructed and understood separately, but especially Indigenous well-being, because Indigenous well-being is to do with how you are in the context of your environment. So this diagram actually represents all of those things that Indigenous people do, maybe other people too, not so much when you're deep in Western ways of being, I think, but all of these things have attached to them intangible values and ethics and ways of being. My God, I haven't spoken for 5 minutes, have I? I've got so much more to say. So, Indigenous wellbeing is a really important concept, and one of the things, I think on the material you've got two of my publications listed, and one of them is an article I wrote for the National Indigenous Times years ago, in which I referenced the outcomes of a focus group I held in Redfern, 23 people in Redfern, who told me about the factors that influenced their well-being. Surprise, surprise, all intangible cultural heritage factors, all to do with values and ethics, connections and relationships. This is the thing about being an Indigenous person in the world that connects us. So when we go and meet Indigenous people from other parts of the world, we've actually got a basis on which to talk to them, and it never ceases to astound me. Indigenous people all over the world before Western colonialism, we were very separated by geography, vast seas and so on, and yet we kind of think the same way about these things. And I was really delighted actually in Mexico in 2010, I met a woman who works with a group of ladies from Guatemala, and she said to me, those women fought for that. They fought for the concept of Indigenous well-being. Interestingly, all Indigenous languages have got a word for it. And maybe we'll get onto some of that if we've got time. Not sure where oh, right, it's going, now it's just going crazy. All right. Oh, David Maljali, the next slide. This is really important. I've clicked it again. It's okay, good. David Maljali says, when talking to people in his own country, we are really sorry for you people. We cry for you. He's talking to white people in his own country, right? We cry for you because you haven't got meaning of culture in this country. We have a gift we want to give you. We keep getting blocked from giving you that gift. We get blocked by politics, and politicians. Well, that's unfair. We get blocked by media, by process of law. All we want to do is come out from under all of this and give you this gift. And it's the gift of pattern thinking. It's the culture, which is the blood of this country, of Aboriginal groups, of the ecology, of the land itself. This is also the secret. This is the doorway, if you like, to the secret, I think, that all of creation is actually connected, that all things potentially have a dreaming, they have a right to be here, and they are really nasty people. No, so, and David drew a map, he drew a picture of Australia in which he put all connecting lines crisscrossing, and I think if you think of that in a kind of three-dimensional, macro space as well as micro, you get an idea of the extent of connections that occurs, and it goes down to the atoms. This is really important. This is New South Wales Wiradjuri people who are working on their language, and I had the privilege to be there just a couple of weekends ago at the start of a new language block with Uncle Stan Grant, who has developed this wonderful language program. One of the things about learning Aboriginal languages is that you get in touch with the way of being and of living. Now, this concept of Yinjamara Winhunga, meaning the wisdom of respectfully knowing how to live well in a world worth living in, also puts the onus on the individual to make the world somewhere worth living in. Don't you think? There's a reciprocity in all of that. I think we're getting back to the real nitty-gritty of what it means to be an Aboriginal person when we start to examine our own cultural precepts in this way. This is a wonderful DVD spoken entirely in Wiradjuri with the English at the bottom. Yinjamara Yambuwan means respecting everything. Think about a world in which that degree of respect was actually something that we learnt from the cradle and that we lived by throughout our lives. Oh, a lot of people here, I'm sure, would already know about Dadiri. Dadiri is a way of sitting and listening and understanding, perhaps meditating. Miriam Rose Ungamar Bowman's wonderful work has enriched the lives of many Australians already. She says that this quality, this capacity to live in this way is what Australians are thirsting for. Can I just say that another thing that the Wiradjuri say about Yinjamara is go slow. Go slow. I'm really trying. It's helped me over the last week to go a little bit more slowly and, reflect as we go and not just rush because of the expectations of having to do certain things. Can you just put it on the next slide? Oh, back one. I'll take the last minute or so that I've got to just briefly introduce Wanta. Wanta, who is a person, he is an elder from Lajamanu, Walpuri man, and who has actually become like a guide to me. I'm very grateful for having Wanta actually in my life. He came here to an event last year that I was part of organising, and people could not get enough of him. In the 2 hours before we waited for the keynote, people were 2 or 3 deep around a table at which he was sitting. He's a teacher and he has a lot of really deep wisdom. Now, this is explaining Milpuri, which is a Walpuri concept that is now celebrated every year in a festival that he holds in that community. And it is, I'm sure you're all reading it, and I've got very little time, so I'm just going to say a couple of things and finish up. But really what this concept is how people can have such a close relationship with country. Such a close relationship. Wanta says that we can be actually shaped by country. Country is a big concept. English isn't adequate, of course, but country, connections, all of the philosophy of being able to live well really can shape us as people. And he asks at the end, who is the gardener and who is the garden? And I think that is the kind of thinking we need to introduce, is this idea that all the taken for granted understandings of who are the actors in the world need to be in a sense, critically analysed, turned on their head, and we look at things in a different way. I generally talk about this kind of thing in reference to the importance of Indigenous knowledges for the age that is upon us, that is the Anthropocene. It's a big word. How many people have heard it? Just out of interest, Anthropocene? Right. It's a word we're all going to hear an awful lot more of. And I really do believe that it's the wisdom of Indigenous peoples in the world who, in fact, I've started to position as Holocene peoples. That's the era, the epoch before the Anthropocene. We need the wisdom of Holocene peoples to nurture us through the Anthropocene. I'll finish there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vicky. And I think the presentation showed the nexus between social emotional wellbeing and physical health, but also looked at the diversity of relationships across the nation with people, with land and country. And if you want to do some further reading, as I mentioned earlier, the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Plan, which was at the time led by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but Warren was the minister responsible for that, Warren Snowden, and it's still in existence now. But in that plan, what we've put is culture at the centre. That's the centre of it all, and then from culture it goes out. When we look at the social emotional wellbeing plan, which is still being considered by government, we have people in the centre and then followed by culture and so forth. So from an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspective, this is critical for where we go in that. So, questions? Oh, down here. Spell anthropopathy.
Thank you. I'm Robin Alders, a non-Aboriginal person born in the Gundungurra country. Thanks so much for an excellent presentation. Here at the University of Sydney, I have an interest in food and nutrition security, so I'd be interested in your thoughts around food systems, links to country, and what that might teach us about living sustainably in Australia. Thanks.
What a question. I do have a big interest in food security, and I've got a very great interest in people having the capacity to eat the foods which are local and which are appropriate and so on. I was fortunate enough myself to have quite a bit of that in my childhood, and teaching from my family, you are what you eat, which, you know, I really don't want to be McDonald's. I've made up my mind about that. But yeah, I think that there's an awful lot of destruction of the natural world that's occurred in Australia. We have, I've just written a chapter for a book about the plough, and the plough is a really taken for granted good thing in Western ways of being. The plough is sort of honest toil, and it produces good societies, and even at the point where they were selling ploughs to destroy more and more Indigenous lands, like the Great Plains, the home of the Comanche in the US, they actually said that rain follows the plough, that if you plough up the land, that you will get rain. So where, you know, a lot of the Earth's topsoils are blowing around in the atmosphere, and we'll never get them back, I don't think, unless somebody works out some scientific way to do it. And so in Australia, Aboriginal people's countries have been extraordinarily degraded. And it's very interesting for me to be down in Wiradjuri country, because at the moment it is so dry. It is painfully dry. It actually kind of hurts to look at it. But the Wiradjuri and their allies there are working on ways of being able to live within a watershed, which is the way that our people have always lived. And so they're constructing, through Wiradjuri language and so on, ways in which people can live and work together in productive ways. And an awful lot of that will be about sourcing food. And, you know, as we move into and through this century, where the whole impact of the Anthropocene is going to be felt more dreadfully by all of us, local food production is going to be the key.
to survival. And I think we need to look more to the foods and the animals, the species that can actually live in this country. We actually need to go back to the drawing board and start again and try and address the huge degradation that's occurred here. So I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you. And while we're waiting for another question, the other issue, organisations like Ninty One have been doing a lot of trialling on bush tomatoes and other foods that are out there. And I think the relationship between, and I know from the federal government point of view, there's nutrition is now starting to gain some focus, particularly around obesity. And like at University of Canberra, the relationship between the health faculty and the sports faculty in teaching Indigenous sports. And so all the teachers in training are learning about Indigenous sports to be able to take into the school. And with that goes some of the, the bush foods as well. Thanks, bud.
Yeah, as an Aboriginal person myself, I just want to say that there should be more Aboriginal schooling for Aboriginal people to get in touch with their culture, because it ain't taught in the white man's school. All I got taught about was Captain Cook and horrific stuff he done. I mean, I want to learn about my own culture. I want to forget about that. I mean, and as it's going, we've lost enough culture as it is. So I think there's a great need for more Aboriginal schooling run by Aboriginal people.
Well, I can only agree. I can only agree, and I think that, I don't know. I've been working in Aboriginal education for several decades, and I don't know, forgive me, but I feel a little bit tired about that issue, really, because, and having done, deep research on the transition of Indigenous children into schooling and so on, and reflecting back on a couple of things that was said earlier today by people, I worked on that report and I did this. So much of what we do just seems to go past governments who have another imperative. Governments are there to be sure that they're re-elected, and they're dealing with a constituency in which we are less than 3%. How do we have any real impact on what they do? And you see, we've been in a period, I hope it's changing, a very strong period with the Northern Territory intervention and other, horrendous things that have been put on our people, whereby our culture has been so disregarded it's considered to be toxic. So in that environment, why would a government develop Aboriginal schooling? The thing is, I think we as Aboriginal people, we now need to stand up and defend our culture, defend our way of life and say, look, hang on, we've got a huge amount to contribute here. And we want our children schooled in our own culture and value systems. It's really got to be, I don't know, how do you be an Aboriginal person in this country without being an activist? I don't think it's possible. Because we are so disregarded. I'd say to my friends internationally, we are the most disregarded people in the world. Make no mistake about it. And I think that, this is a real call for activism at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. And I think that's potentially a topic we could do as part of a Poche Key Thinkers forum, because education is in fact a determinant of health. And so we can link it up that way. But we've got some good examples in Warren's turf. You've got Yupperinya School, that's been going for a long while. You've got the Murray School up in Brisbane, which are all Aboriginal controlled. But yeah, there needs to be a lot more that we've got to work on. Yeah, another question was there? Yep. Oh, we've got two questions. Who gets there first? Jane, you...
Miriam Cavan again. My question is, for intellectual property for the traditional healers, What's your feeling about when you do traditional medicine and then you've got pharmaceutical companies and other people that patent your traditional medicine and don't give back to, say, traditional healers or the Aboriginal communities? I see it all the time because my uncle tells me he's got traditional healing that he uses for cancer up in the Torres Strait. I have family members that are in far north Queensland that do the same thing. What is anybody on the panel, what is your opinion about that part of intellectual property, giving them back and giving the community?
So Tom might want to give you a bit of an update on some of the for WIPO through the UN system, but it's interesting. So on the one hand, I'm absolutely about the protection and promotion of traditional knowledges and Indigenous intellectual property. How we do that is difficult because we're having to work within a legal system that's not set up for that kind of often intangible knowledge. And also, this is knowledge that cannot be individually owned. It's our birthright. It actually belongs to a family, a tribal group, a geographical spread of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And so that, as well as being one of our greatest strengths, also provides us with a barrier in a system that wasn't ever established for us or to support us. But having said that, there's a lot of work both domestically and internationally that are looking at the development of legal precedent and practice that will in turn protect us, and things that we take for granted like story, song, performance, art. You know, how many factories in Bali in Southeast Asia love to do the dot paintings and employ the backpackers to sell shit back to us as Aboriginal art? So how do we then protect our stories, our practice, our language in a manner that is relevant and appropriate to us, but also then brings back some of that collective benefit through commercialisation?
And I think for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander members here is one of the reasons why you need to get behind the National Congress of Australia's First People, because that body is the one that represents our interests, and not only domestically but internationally. And through the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, it's very clear that our intellectual property needs to be respected and owned. And through the World Intellectual Property Organisation, WIPO, they're doing a lot of work in this, in traditional medicines and practices. So we need to get behind them to support them.
Jane here again. I just want to thank you, Vicky, for that very grounding presentation and bringing us back to the basics of what it's all about. I've got a question, partly for Ngungri ladies also. I was involved with the consultations for the National Aboriginal Health Plan, and I remember one elderly gentleman in Sydney saying very clearly that for him it was about dance, and that actually what we needed to be keeping alive was dance. And I just wondered about that in the context of culture broadly, and especially in relation to the Ngungri work, the importance of dance.
Could I comment first? I think that more than 500 Aboriginal men in New South Wales are now dancing. This is a movement that started maybe 10 years ago and has grown. I know that at Yarwun, at least last year, I don't know about this year, but the greatest interest was in the dancing. And I want to go back to a thing that Tom said, that the importance of people growing their own food and so on. I mean, if you're growing your own food or hunting for it or provisioning for yourself locally, you're getting exercise. Dance is, of course, it's more than exercise. I think it is ceremony and dance that connects us to the eternal. And that's a big thing for me to explain right now in an answer, but it is in that paper, the book that I wrote, Aboriginal Spirituality, Aboriginal Philosophy, and the Social and Emotional Wellbeing of Aboriginal People. And because one of the things that we have the capacity to do as a people is to connect to the eternal. And this is also in terms of our understanding of the nature of time, if you like, the dreaming idea of every when. So, when people dance, and it's in that, that there's a picture of Wiradjuri feet,
they're saying the Wiradjuri feet connect with the eternal when they're kicking up the dust in the dance. That is, you know, a part of what we do as people. So it is sustaining, it is spiritually sustaining to be actually acting out meaningfully on your own country. And it is also, quite incidentally, excellent exercise. And, you know, I think that it should be a prerequisite, actually. I think if you want to define what is a real man, number one, he should be able to dance.
Great message, thank you.
I think that culturally that is very important. You know, we have men who do these displays for us. I mean, how nice is that? And if you've ever been to Gama, you might understand what I'm talking about.
But I'm already married. But.
So,
just Debbie would like to answer your question in relation to Nankari work and dance.
APO learned that Nankari doesn't dance. Nankari do like sick people healing. They do not dancing with, learn and do the treatment to the sick ones and check their spirit too.
So in the Nangari world, there is no dance involved. So it's the way they treat people is through their hands. Right? You want to say a little bit about that?
Maybe sick one in hospital, we use our hand to treat people and check spirit. Spirit is, we all got spirit. Spirit is made one for everyone, like different animal. We check spirit is in right area. Sometimes spirit is not in right area. People got sick, goes down. You know, when we check, we put spirit in right area, we got more energy.
Thank you. In the interest of balance, yes, we've got a question on this side.
Hi, thank you for today. It's been amazing and really interesting. My name is Mary Carroll and I'm here as an individual, but I also managed to get New South Wales Health in my part-time role to support me in coming, which was great. And I'll take this information back to our team. I'm hearing about ceremony and dance, and I'm thinking about singing up country and weaving and people coming together. And I'm hearing about culture, and I guess I'm wondering about what role traditional law has in Ngangkari healing and closing the gap. Are we assuming that's the same thing, or I'm just wondering, is there a difference between culture and everything we're talking about in culture and traditional law? Are you able to answer that? I don't know.
Well, I suppose it depends how you interpret culture. So it might be a very broad umbrella concept within which you can encapsulate traditional law. So it depends how you interpret it. So as for the Ngangkari, you know, they have their teaching, which is part of their traditional culture. But, you know, it's what I have learned is that there are roles. So like the Ngangkari, for example, does not dance in terms of when it does the healing. So it's not a dance-based healing process. For example, now that we are talking to dance. So there are a lot of different components of culture, as in any culture. So it's, there are different roles. And so, well, it depends how you interpret it and what you talk about. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to whether it's LORE or LAW in what we're talking. And you know, when we talk about customary law practices, it's about relationship to land and to community and kin. And so that's at one level, and their behavioural practices and belief systems that a group would share. And it's not, you know, you don't have one law that applies across Australia when you're talking customary law. very peculiar to an area and that practice. And whilst there might be common elements to it across the nation, it's not common across the nation. So, but when you're talking about healing, that's a different practice, but it all comes under custom and traditional practice. But you know, one determines behaviour, the other one's looking at a healing element to it. Okay, no last questions. Oh, there's one down here, Michael.
Hi, it's Michael from the dark space down here. But what I was going to say, I think that Australians have to recognise the constant attack, I guess the constant pressure on Aboriginal people in society, I guess from society, with, I guess, programs that are created, and then when you have a new government that comes on board, they wipe the table clean, and it's just continually happening. So it's hard to get a consistency going there. And also the things that, when we look, that we see from the booing of Adam Goodes to the Aboriginal lucky dolls at airports to people doing black faces, it's just a constant, I guess, a constant barrage of negative things that are impacting on Aboriginal people and their health that I think has to also be recognised and addressed. That they aren't little things, that they all add up and all contribute to the situation that we're in.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I really agree with it. And I think one of the things we need to do is to recognise that racism causes an injury. And for example, there was an occasion at this university last year or the year before where one of the lecturers was caught out using the most dreadful language about Aboriginal people in emails, and he lost his job. But one of the things that I was asking for and that never happened was that the Aboriginal staff were brought together to talk about how they felt about that. One woman I know actually was in tears, and she said, "I don't like my family being spoken of as if they live on a garbage dump." That really hurt her. And the thing is, as Aboriginal people, we have these slights that are, you know, racist slurs and slights that are in the media. You know, what happened to Adam Goodes, for example, hurt a lot of people, not just Adam Goodes. And so we, you know, this is the thing we have to deal with all the time. And it's only symptomatic of what I'm saying to you is this huge disregard of Aboriginal culture. And we need to be putting resources into things like the Wiradjuri program, Wiradjuri language program at Charles Sturt University, which is under threat. And it's produced so much already. You could document the way that people have gone off to live their lives in much more productive ways. There's a research that came out of Curtin University in WA a few years ago, in which this economist, he ended up speaking to me about the research because he sourced my work and well-being. But he said he was given a brief to go and look at what the economics of Aboriginal people being involved in cultural activity. And while the way he defined cultural activity, I think, could have actually been improved upon, I don't think he actually had any Aboriginal advice for the project at all. But just the same, what he discovered was that Aboriginal people who are involved in cultural activity are more likely to be economically independent. Now, doesn't that just go against everything we seem to hear from government? That we need to get away from our own cultural activity and we need to be going into mainstream because this is where our future lies.
Culture is, sorry, what I was going to say is culture is important in the aspect of healing too. I think people reconnecting with culture and that. And
but
I think
it is holistic. I mean, at the risk of you overusing the word, it's a holistic picture, isn't it? You know that.
Well, Yeah, with health, it's got to be mental, physical, cultural, spiritual, community and country. It's got to be all looked at in that aspect. And I think the onus is on all Australians to actually understand that wherever you walk, there's been a Blackfoot there before, and that they have a responsibility to help and to look after and respect Aboriginal people and culture. Because people come to Australia, they don't want to go and see a building. If you want to go and see an old building, go to the pyramids. Australian Aboriginal people and their culture, plus our unique country we're connected to, is what people want to come and see and listen to the stories.
Thank you, Michael. We'll take that as a comment, and we won't go into questions. I had to get that in somehow today. But can I now invite Dr. Nairi Brown to come up and give the presentation? I mentioned earlier that Nairi was the original director of Poche Sydney, and so it'll be an interesting discussion, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know you're surprised that they had me back. You have to help me with that because I'm a techno doofus. Thank you. That would be too bad. Do you want to play that one? I think I'll be there. So, Gamarada Mitigar Gurungburuk, which means welcome. A friend is happy to see you, and I'd like to offer greetings and blessings from the Yuin Nation people of the south coast of New South Wales. I'm a saltwater woman. I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects, to the traditional custodians and thank my cousin there for welcome. I'd like to respect my elders, my brothers and sisters that are here today, but also to each of you, and thank the Poche Centre Network for the opportunity to come back and to be able to participate. So look, I'm an old doctor, but I'm actually quite junior culturally, so I have no authority to be able to tell a Ngurri story at all. But what I can do is talk to you about how passionate many of us are about acknowledging our diversity, as has been mentioned previously, but also being able to promote models for the reclamation and the revitalisation of culture and how important that is for well-being. Now, what I will express are my opinions, but we'll see how this works. Successive governments, so be they Commonwealth, state and territory, and whether intentionally or unintentionally, are eroding, I feel, our sovereignty and our cultural birthrights. And so Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are continually having to negotiate and compromise down from what I see as an ever diminishing base in Aboriginal affairs. And even when we talk about empowerment and Aboriginal advancement, what we actually have is this predetermined assimilationist agenda where they might ask for some token comment or a tick and flick, but in fact, we have mainstreaming of services. We're still on that path. We have most of our funding for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander services and health going to PHNs or to large non-government, non-Aboriginal organisations. And whilst Vicky talks of being quite tired in this space, it's because we're continually having to repeat ourselves, because governments come and go, politicians come and go, but we remain as the anchor. And we are magnificent, and it would be lovely if perhaps some of what we have to offer actually is not only listened to, but taken on board and is then embedded in the nature of the way that we do policy, resourcing and service delivery in this country. Again, that's just my personal opinion. Yay. So what's my stuff? So I mentioned before when Miriam asked a question, I'm very much about thinking how we privilege Indigenous knowledge, how we protect Indigenous intellectual property and traditional knowledge, how we preserve and promote cultural integrity, whatever that might mean, and how we look at exploring and articulating and then applying what are the cultural determinants, as opposed to the social determinants, the cultural determinants of health and well-being, and then use those when we approach research, policy, service delivery and resourcing. In particular, I love munchkins, so child and adolescent wellbeing in particular, and how we take cultural education, cultural knowledge, and build an evidence base which demonstrates that we can connect culture, resilience and wellbeing. And there's been some work here and a little bit more overseas, and how we can develop and then implement novel vehicles for this cultural revitalisation, including science and curricular reform. And it's interesting that we've talked about Aboriginal schools, that we've talked about how we introduce and reintroduce broader Australia to who we are as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We don't even have compulsory core national curriculum at primary schools. Education departments will tell you that they do, but they are so inconsistent in their application that we have people coming to universities for tertiary education that are fabulous and privileged and entitled and smart, and they don't know the first thing about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in their own country, on our own land. So it would be fantastic. We're also talking about models for like cultural immersion schools that exist internationally, and particularly say Canada, Hawaii and Aotearoa, where we begin with the notions of being powerful and empowered Indigenous peoples and knowing our language, knowing our connections and who we are. And then from there being educated in the English language and literacy and numeracy and all of the other aspects of that broad construct of what learning and education is. And you know, I feel that there is probably nothing more frightful to politicians and to governments than an educated black fella with an opinion, right? So if they can do as much as they can to keep us on the down low, then that's exactly what they'll do. I love you, Oz, really. It was interesting, we were talking about what culture is. Now, this is just a snapshot from some documentation from the UN, but the UN acknowledges that cultural policies aim to protect, stimulate and enrich each people's identity and cultural heritage and establish absolute respect for and appreciation of cultural minorities and other cultures of the world, and the neglect or destruction of the culture of any group is a loss to mankind as a whole. And we know that culture is a protective factor and that cultural education is a pathway to more resilient generations. So, you know, if we want our children to be smart, happy, healthy, if we want them to contribute economically, if we don't want them to be radicalised in any way, irrespective of who they are or their backgrounds, then they need to feel loved, valued and connected to themselves, to community, to family, but also more broadly and valued in society. And we don't do that particularly well. Now, the Australian Indigenous Doctors Association has spent over a decade developing a very beautiful and deeply respectful relationship with Nunkaris, particularly in Central Australia and Alice Springs, but also now more broadly, because we know that our traditional healers are as diverse as the cultures and the communities from which they originate. And they, in fact, are our original doctors, but they're more than that. So they are leaders and teachers, they're role models, and they're vessels for more than 2,000 generations of cultural continuity and wisdom, knowledge and practice. And it's interesting that our relationship, whilst we take them to international meetings and they've received global acknowledgement and mental health awards, for example, it's actually really one-sided, because what we actually gain from having them as part of our extended family is extraordinary, and you cannot possibly put a price on that. But when institutions actually have discussed with some of these Nunkaris, and I pay my respects to the senior men that we've lost in the last few years, when they've discussed perhaps researching the work of Nunkari and how we document their practice and their effect in communities, they told us that if in fact this was a move only to appropriate knowledge in order to validate them in a Western paradigm, then thanks but no thanks. Because they have no desire nor need for non-Aboriginal affirmation when they've been keeping Aboriginal people well for more than 60,000 years, and I find that quite extraordinary. And it goes to some of those issues of, not just the legal sense of intellectual property and protection, but just this deep-seated faith and belief and knowing that what you do is extraordinary and will actually keep your people alive. So, broadly speaking, we understand the social determinants of health, and we talk about that all the time. What Tom hasn't mentioned is that the report, when he was Social Justice Commissioner, was called Health Equality Within a Generation, is that right? Which I actually think was appropriated by the WHO commissioned report on the social determinants of health, and I know, health equality within a generation. Genius. And they called it closing the gap, bastards. So we know that the social determinants are the conditions in which we are born, we grow old. We live, we work, we age, and these circumstances are shaped at a local, national and global level by money and politics and power and the distribution. It's also the social determinants that are mostly responsible for health inequities, both within countries but also between. And within countries, you know, that social gradient. But despite a solid evidence base and recognising that acceptable, accessible and high quality, or the 3A, the human rights and health 3AQ of service delivery are really important for good health, this construct still has a limited capacity to be able to reduce socio-economic and racial disparities in health and social justice outcomes. So for a number of years we've been exploring what the cultural determinants of health and wellbeing might look like. And so as part of the Close the Gap work, and using a strength-based approach and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People as kind of a thematic framework, we've been looking at what, you know, the cultural determinants might look like, taking into consideration those issues of land, language, practice, dance, story, ceremony, art. We know that strong cultural links and practices are protective factors, and particularly from the stuff I'm interested in, they actually improve childhood and adolescent resilience against emotional and behavioural problems. It leads to a stronger sense of self, identity and self-worth, and also confidence. It improves the outcomes across health, education and employment, so in fact in turn impacts on the social determinants. And it reduces substance abuse, self-harm and suicide, and many of you might be familiar with the work of Chandler and Lalonde and those guys. And there's also some domestic and international work on developing the metrics that will assist Indigenous peoples and their communities to be able to, you know, measure well-being, but in a way that is inclusive of culturally relevant and appropriate concepts. And we were able to present at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues last year with Meg Davis. Yay! So this is quite beautiful, and the concept of Kanyini was gifted to some work my brother was doing with senior men, including Nunkery in Central Australia a number of years ago. And it's a way in which the way I look at it is, how do we reclaim our space and foster pride and responsibility and contribution? Because, you know, as has been mentioned previously, there's always a deficit perspective when people are thinking of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, that we're naughty, that we cannot be educated, that we are a blight on, you know, on welfare and the Australian society. But in fact, we are beautiful and precious. And Kanyini is a powerful, beautiful, precious cultural construct. It is about how we hold, care and nurture. And it reflects our responsibility to one another, so to the young, to the old, to the vulnerable, but how we embody connection, empathy and compassion for other Aboriginal people, of course, but for everybody that is part of humanity. And so we need to think about how we are able to translate these concepts that are culturally valid and powerful to us in particular, but we've talked about a number of gifts that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are offering, have always offered, but, you know, people seem hesitant to want to accept, and accept it in the nature of generosity in which we give it. And so how do we translate this into our personal lives, into our professional spheres, and also how we raise our children and connect our communities through these principles? Do me, cool.
Thank you, Nye, and that was you know, a great presentation. And when we should look at social determinants are common across the world because that relates to everybody. But once we get to cultural determinants, they're really appropriate to Indigenous people or minority peoples who have a specific culture. And Australia has actually led the development of cultural determinants. Nye was one of the prime movers in that through the Close the Gap campaign. And so that's the important bit. It's still trying to gain a bit of resonance, but at least it's being discussed now internationally from it. So thank you, Nye. Questions? Anybody? Ty again. Jane, good on you.
I'll just jump in the gap. There is a gap, so
yeah.
I'll ask
Take
this
a breath.
question. I'm really interested in the metrics because at the end of the day, obviously, governments fund something they want to be measurable. And so I'm just interested in your thinking about the qualitative and quantitative options there for looking at progress.
So in terms of what we propose as Indigenous peoples and all of the other lovelies that, you know, support us and you know, help us, that's often the easy part. So we know what we want. And in fact, what we proposed back in the day around Close the Gap, the indicators, timelines and outcomes that we proposed and actually presented, if they'd done any of those, particularly around cardiovascular risk and diabetes and what we know is predominantly responsible for the gaps in outcomes and life expectancy, for example, if they'd done that back then, we'd be halfway there. Not done, because it didn't suit them. Because of course, as Vicky mentioned, for senior bureaucrats and departments and politicians, their interests are in staying where they are, as opposed to something that is, despite the individual passions and commitment I know of individuals, as a government and as a society, we are no priority at all. So so the problem then is, how do we find the right champions to help us promote and then translate the science and the evidence into better policy? Does that kind of make sense? So we know what we need to be doing. That's kind of the easy part. Even the development of metrics that might be, you know, a bit sort of, you know, non-scientific and airy-fairy, but, you know, around well-being, what the hell does that mean? Depends. If you ask 10 people what well-being is, you get 20 different answers. That's okay, because we can approximate some of that, right? So it's...
non-scientific.
But from, you know, from that perspective, so I understand the concepts in terms of how Indigenous people feel it and understand it. I'm an Aboriginal woman first and foremost, then I'm a clinician and a researcher, right? So, you know, it's not even walking two worlds, it's jumping all over the place, right? So it's then how we convince people that control the purse strings and shape the policy. We went completely gonads out on a range of, you know, measures, indicators and outcomes for Close the Gap, and then also the health plan and implementation plan. But as with anything, completely cherry-picked, so that, you know, how do we influence that? That's the hard part. So you need people that are delightful and fabulous, and then you have, you know, people that are a tad more bunter like me that seem irrational. So Romney Mokak does that really well. Mark Winnetong does it really well. We do good black, bad black, right? So I'm on the crazy side. They're all smooth and handsome, and they say the same thing, but in a way that's very Barry White. So people want to listen to that. So that, I mean, I don't have a single answer, and, you know, if I did, I'd be worth more, probably.
Yeah.
Could I just say, well, I take Nairi's point, you know, that people do think well-being is, well, actually an anthropologist said to me once, well, you know, we've discussed, people on this project as well, we've discussed well-being, and we're not going to look at that, it's just not hard-nosed enough. And I said, oh, have you read my work? Well, she hadn't, obviously. But the problem with the whole concept of well-being is that it is intangible. And people want to be able to work in absolutes. And more than that, they want to be able to find the quick fix. What is going to close the gap? Give us the formula, right? And there is none. It's actually really highly complex. And it's complicated. And it's taken us many years to get to the position that we're in of disadvantage. It's going to take us a while to get out of it too. So it's not, you know, the next great black hope or the next idea that somebody comes up with on a third floor of the government building in Canberra that's going to close the gap. And the thing about Indigenous wellbeing is that it is actually really driven by Indigenous people who understand culture. And they understand culture as the wellspring of life, the capacity to live well. And when you've got that, I think a lot of health issues fall into place. You know, that's the point. But, you know, I do take your point that the whole concept of well-being can be terribly misused. You know, when the United Nations said Indigenous well-being needs to be the basis of all policy and programs to do with Indigenous people, we had a Prime Minister who was talking about economic well-being. They just translated it into their own agendas. You know, so therefore you need money to have well-being. Well, in actual fact, you don't, and you don't even have to be healthy to have well-being. You can be on death's door and have well-being. It is about what you hold dear, all of these intangibles, the idea that you've fulfilled your rights and your responsibilities, that you've got everything level, as some people talk about it, that things are humming along nicely, that you're in touch with the things that are really important to you as a person. It's complex, but it's really, really important. And it will take time. It will take time. It's not going to bring about changes overnight. But I tell you what, when I go to visit Wiradjuri, or when I meet with Walpuri, or other people around the country doing great work on culture, I'm really heartened by that. And I think we've got the capacity to take this into our own hands and make it work for us. People in Redfern are doing it. It's a highly urbanised Aboriginal community, but people are actually working on things to do with their well-being in a cultural way.
Thanks, Vicky.
Thanks, Vicky and Nye, for your comments. I mean, you've established that cultural determinants are very important for health outcomes, for contact with the justice system, mental health, economic prosperity, etc. And you're talking about some of the programs that are being run. As someone who's not aware of those programs, I wonder if you could elaborate exactly, how that cultural, how people are being better connected with culture.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Liz, but I won't allow Vicky to respond to that, only because we're running close to time. But can I say, I mentioned earlier that the Social Emotional Wellbeing Plan is currently with government. It's the Australian Health Ministers Advisory Council will have the final say on it. But Professor Pat Dudgeon, an Aboriginal lady in West Australia, has led that the redevelopment of the plan, this next tranche. So we're expecting that'll come out pretty shortly. But it picks up on all of those issues, and as I said earlier, it's centralised around culture, and so we take it from there. We've heard some great speakers. I know there's probably some questions here. I had one last question that I wanted to ask, and I ask it because he's a close friend of the Poche Centres for Indigenous Health, and that's Dr. Professor Warren Walsh, who's a cardiovascular surgeon who does a lot of work in Tennant Creek and Alice Springs. And I was wondering, Warren, put you on the spot. You work in this turf, in this territory. Have you come across traditional healers, or do you think there's a role, as a mainstream practitioner?
Thanks, Tom, for putting me on the spot. I have not had any direct interaction with traditional healers, but I'm well aware from the patients I see in the territory that many of them have access to traditional healers. I appreciate coming here today to learn more about it, because I need to know about it. It's obviously, every time I go to these talks, it reinforces to me how important culture and history is to Aboriginal people. I'm a little uncomfortable because I'm, first of all, not a professor, I'm not a surgeon. I'm just a mere doctor. I'm a cardiologist, this is rather than a surgeon. But I've been doing a lot of work with Aboriginal people in Central Australia for many years now. It's been very frustrating and challenging exercise. I haven't seen any real progress, and this is reflected in the fact that the life expectancy gap remains very wide, mainly because non-Aboriginal people are living longer. So there has been improvement in Aboriginal life expectancy, but so has it happened in non-Aboriginal people. So the gap remains wide, and it certainly won't be closed by the time of generation, which is supposed to be 2031, I think. And I don't see it being closed for a very long time, unfortunately. One of the things that frustrates me is practicing mainstream medicine is the enormous rate of heart risk factors that are prevalent in Aboriginal people, which translates into lots of heart disease. For example, smoking is almost half Aboriginal people smoke, less than 20% non-Aboriginal people smoke. If we could get that down to non-Aboriginal levels, that would have a huge impact on cardiovascular health. So it's very difficult, and I tear my hair out when I see Aboriginal patients who had very brilliant cardiac surgery in Adelaide or somewhere and are still smoking. it breaks my heart. And this is something that we need to address in a big way. The same with diabetes. Diabetes is much more common. And I realise there's a history to this because this was never present way back. It's an impact of Western culture on Aboriginal people, which has been disastrous for their health. The other thing that is disturbing is rheumatic fever, which is still quite common in Aboriginal people, particularly remote communities. It disappeared from non-Aboriginal people with the rising in the standard of living, but it's still not uncommon at all in remote communities in the top end and North Queensland and Kimberleys. It's absolute disgrace that it's occurring at all. But rheumatic fever is a disease of poverty, and that's why we still see it. So I think there's an awful lot to be done. I think the gap, one of the things I learned about this is that I realise that more nurses, more doctors, more health workers are not going to close the gap. What is apparent is that the social determinants are critical. Until we address the disempowerment, the psychosocial stress issues, the overcrowded, poor housing, the lack of employment, the lack of educational employment, that's the only way we'll ever close the gap. There's no medical solution to closing the gap. The social determinants have to be determined. This requires a huge financial investment by governments, and as you already heard, there are no votes in Aboriginal health. So it is a big disincentive for governments to get involved in that. And it's a very difficult issue indeed, but that's what needs to happen. And hopefully one day we'll have a Prime Minister which will have a vision and courage to do something about that. Thank you.
Another one. Thank you. Thank you, Warren. I just also would like to recognise another strong supporter here in John Skinner from New South Wales Department of Health, who's really got behind what Poche is doing in New South Wales. Look, it gives me, I think, I'm going to say pleasure, but I know that there's a few people want to go, others have been here, but it gives me the privilege to thank our panellists for great contributions in this very thought-provoking issue. And Kylie will do the honours and hand out a small token of our appreciation from Poche Sydney and also the Poche Indigenous Health Network. Can I thank Kylie and her team who have pulled this together again in another top show, the biggest attendance group we've had at a Key Thinkers Forum so far, and let's hope we can get them. We're always interested in receiving any suggestions from you guys as to what sort of topics you'd like to have that are really pressing topics in Indigenous health that we need to address. Can't say we'll do it immediately, but we'd welcome that. Can I also thank the Lime Network for their support in recording and broadcasting this. I can't thank those people out there online who didn't send any questions in on this time, but they better do a better job next time. But really, it goes without saying, but thank you all for your contributions today and participation and interest. This is only going to work if we can work together in this issue. And one of the ways we can do that, coming up at the end of next month, is National Reconciliation Week. So get behind those reconciliation events that are there. A couple of weeks later, a few weeks later, we've then got NAIDOC Week, another time to celebrate, Indigenous affairs and to get more knowledge about what's happening across the nation with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. But thank you all for your attendance. And we'll get lunch, so help yourself to a bit of lunch out there. Grab and run if you want to, or stick around and press these guys. Oh,
Tom,
Francesca.
Can I just make two announcements before we leave? Yeah. I would like to let you know that we will be in Sydney until maybe mid of next week, providing healing treatments. We will be offering this service from the Petrozzi Wellness Centre. He's an Italian friend of mine. He's a chiropractor, and he has very generously offered the space for the ladies to provide the healing. So if you are interested to make a booking for a session, depending on how many people will book a session, the ladies that told me that they're happy to stay next week in Sydney to to give the treatment. So I'm going to put some flyers there about ANTAC with our email and contact details. So just send us an email and I will get back to you as soon as I check my emails. And there will be also some copies of our report for sale, or an order form if you like to purchase it. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us here.
Could I just briefly say something? Sorry, Kylie. I'm going to have my voice heard. I wanted to make a special mention of Tracy McCarthy and Kaya Abawaji, who originally had the idea of how wonderful it would be to have Ngurkari in Sydney. And it certainly is very wonderful. And thank you so much, both of you, for having the foresight and the capacity to organise, to bring on such a wonderful event. Thank you.
And the very last is to thank Tom, who's been a fabulous MC for us today, as always. So join me in thanking Tom Calma. Thank you.
Once you serve. Yes. Well, serve yourself anyway.
How gorgeous. Thank you so much. Aren't they beautiful? They are. Yes. I know.
That wasn't me.
Well done.
Yeah, that's good, eh?
Now, I'm here to tell you,
You got it? Yeah.
my topic is Indigenous culture and knowledges of health policy, and I'm actually going to use the next chapter as a case study in regards to, my aim is what are the implementation implications for having quality as a central element, sorry, for having culture as a central element as well as the brain. And I'm not quite, and I wondered whether you were open around me bouncing my mind with you.
Yeah. Tracking me down is always a hard bit, but the person who you must speak to in this is Ronnie Mojack.
Yeah, I've got Ronnie.
He's a letter. Now, the two things that in the health policy, that's got people in the centre, but in the social and emotional wellbeing, we've got culture in the centre. And no, other way around.
Yeah.
Our senior centre and culture centre, so there's a lot of synergy between the two reports. Pat and I did social emotional wellbeing, but also done the mental health and suicide prevention. So suicide prevention and the health plan are the only two like others. And this is a plan. And so I think that's a good story.